The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been talking over the last few days about the obsession with the American right wing to call things scandals that aren't really scandals. And I want to make clear that the implication that I have been trying to make is not that there are no real scandals or crises, because we actually have a real one, which I think is very important to talk about, which is the military sexual assault crisis. I don't know that scandal is the right word, but certainly a crisis, Lewis.
Yes.
The most recent news is that a soldier assigned to coordinate a sexual assault prevention program in Texas is now being investigated for being someone who committed sexual assaults. And there's a lot of other alleged misconduct. There's been a suspension from duty, according to the Army's latest announcement. Now, that announcement, Lewis, came just 1 week after an Air Force officer who headed up another sexual assault prevention office was himself arrested on charges of groping a woman in a parking lot. So to contextualize this, I think first we should look at recent sexual assault allegations in the military. So let's put that graphic up for people who are watching. Military sexual assault cases in 2009 and 2010. This is according to McClatchy. And a total of 2,039 rape and sexual assault allegations were made. Now, of those
are just the ones that are reported.
Those are just the ones that are reported, exactly. Forget about the fact that countless of these incidents are never reported,
right,
because they have to go through the chain of command, which I will talk about, and they never officially are reported because those in the chain of command are sometimes involved in the assaults. 2,039 are reported, okay? Allegations are made. All but 551 either receive non-criminal punishment, or the victim ends up declining to participate in any kind of prosecution or follow-up, and the reasons for that are also disturbing. The commander declines to take action or some other resolution, right? So of the 2,039, which is a small fraction of the ones that take place, 551 actually lead to courts-martial. Of those 551 from 2009 to 2010, only 147 actually resulted in rape or other sexual offense convictions. So 114 were convicted of lesser charges, 52 were discharged instead of ever going to trial, about 200 were either acquitted or dismissed, 40 had some other resolution, and 147 out of the 2,039 original allegations. Now, we could say, sometimes there are allegations made which either don't meet the spirit or the letter of sexual assault, and it would make sense that not all 2,039 lead to convictions for rape or sexual assault, and I would agree with that. However, it is not a 147 for every 2,039 ratio. That we can be absolutely sure of.
Right, and this is what's happening every year, basically. And if you compare this to the civilian equivalent, the numbers, it's estimated that how many what's the percentage that go unreported when it comes to civilian cases?
It's more than half, I think.
I mean, so you could probably double this number.
You could at least probably double it, realistically speaking. Now, we can talk about kind of two issues here. One is what is making this happen, and that's more of a cultural, societal question. And we've talked about that a lot on this show, so I don't want to address that angle right now. I want to address the angle of what is the system in the military that is preventing justice from happening, which, of course, will serve to only encourage the idea that you can get away with this.
Well, it's that there's no civilian unit. There's no alternative justice system for you.
It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that because it is really about chain of command. Chain of command in the military is this kind of hierarchy of authority and responsibility where at each level you report whatever it is or make whatever requests to the level of command that is immediately above you, and they make the decision about whether it goes to the next level. This was originally based on the British system, right? The British military system had this chain of command. The American system was based off of that British system. However, the British have already stopped using chain of command for sexual assault cases years ago because they realized it doesn't work. When those in the chain of command are involved in the sexual assault or have an interest in it not being reported, for example, if I'm in the chain of command,
look bad.
Exactly, and I want a promotion, I don't want it showing up anywhere that lower on my chain of command, there were sexual assault reports.
Right.
So I have an interest in not reporting them. Chain of command here is an absolute problem. It needs to be changed. The British have already realized it needs to be changed, period. That's it.
Yeah, it's the quickest fix in the world. When it comes to sexual assault and similar things, you don't use the chain of command.
No question
Very
about
simple.
it. Dick Cheney, speaking of scandals that aren't scandals now, Dick Cheney was on the Sean Hannity show, and he had something to say about Benghazi. It might not surprise you. Maybe it would. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Exclusive reaction. Former Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. Mr. Vice President, welcome back, sir.
Good evening, John. Great to talk to you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm listening to those no there. It sounded to me like a little bit of a challenge, reminded me a little bit of when Gary Hart said, just follow me.
Yeah, well, they did.
And so they did.
No, I watched the Benghazi thing with great interest, Sean. I think it's one of the worst incidences, frankly, that I can recall.
Let's stop there just for a second. You're going to need to, for a second, put aside the fact that Dick Cheney seems to be making very basic English mistakes. He says that it's one of the worst incidences that he can recall. Now, of course, an incidence is a rate. It's a measure of how prevalent something is. Dick Cheney, I think, is talking about an incident, right? He's talking about it. He used the wrong word. Let's, for a second, just assume that we know what he's talking about and listen to the subject matter, not how he said it, but what he says.
They put the whole capability claiming the terrorist problem is solved once we got bin Laden, that al-Qaeda was over with. If they told the truth about Benghazi, that it was a terrorist attack by an al-Qaeda-affiliated group, it would have destroyed the false image of competence that was the basis of his campaign for re-election.
There you go. So there's Dick Cheney making what at this point is a very tired and widely discredited case that this was all a political ploy, very strategically calibrated by the Obama administration. Now, let's assume that Dick Cheney said what he meant, not what he said, which is that Benghazi is one of the worst incidents that he can recall. This is the worst that Dick Cheney can recall. His memory apparently must have reset on January 20th, 2009. Or maybe one of his big piles of cash from war profits collapsed under its own weight and hit him in the head, resulting in amnesia. This is the worst incident that Dick Cheney can remember. Do any of us believe that?
No, he's lying. He's decided it's his mission to try and destroy Obama and his administration.
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to do.
But we also have to remember, what about the multiple embassy and consulate attacks and deaths that took place under his watch and for which he and George W. Bush received no scrutiny? No scrutiny. It's just completely absurd that this is now they're starting the parade, Natan, just parading any Republican they can to kind of jump on the bandwagon and issue some kind of a criticism.
Yeah, I mean, those incidences that you mentioned earlier don't count because he was in charge at that point. So, Obama's in charge now, and so everything that happens while he's president is held to a different standard.
It's a very different standard.
It
now.
really seems like this is all just an act of desperation.
Just today, I watched John Boehner go out and in one of these political stunts just meant for to create visual interest. He issued a briefing. He answered some questions from the press, standing next to like a hand cart, which had thousands and thousands of pages, like a big stack of pages, which represent Obamacare. And this, of course, was under the premise that the Republican Party, even though John Boehner said Obamacare is the law of the land, still continuing to try to repeal Obamacare. I know that this is crazy. If you haven't been paying attention to this, you would say, hold on a second, it's already passed the Supreme Court's, it's already been analyzed and evaluated by the Supreme Court. This is now the law. Doesn't matter. Republicans still trying to get rid of Obamacare because they think it's going to be really bad. At the same time, Think Progress put out an article which outlines how Obamacare has already forced private insurers to lower premiums, the opposite of what Republicans said would happen, isn't it, Lewis?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, they also say it will eventually bankrupt the country.
Right. Well, we'll see when that happens.
Yeah.
2 Oregon private insurers who want to sell coverage on the state's Obamacare insurance marketplace starting in October are now lowering their opening bids for what the monthly premiums will be. Why? Because a side-by-side regional comparison of all of the proposed 2014 premiums for Oregon became public. It all went public. And these two insurers realized, whoa, we're way higher than everybody else. Let's reevaluate because we want to be competitive within this Obamacare insurance marketplace, and deciding then to reduce rates by as much as 15%. This is a good thing. And for people worried, I know some people will say, hold on a second, Obamacare is artificially, I guess would be the term, artificially forcing insurers to charge less, which means their businesses won't be sustainable. No. We have so much waste, so many bogus medical costs, so many layers of infrastructure that are the source of a lot of this spending, that insurance companies can still be profitable, even when they actually have to really compete on price, which really they don't have to, even though presumably we have free market capitalism in this country. They're just going to have to be more efficient. That's the reality. This is a very, very good thing.
Right. But ultimately, is this what we want to do if we're trying to eliminate a for-profit healthcare system?
That's the broader question, right, Natan? Which is always, for all of the good things that Obamacare has done, is it further locking in the for-profit healthcare system, as Lewis is alluding to?
Yes and no. I mean, there's a bunch of pilot programs in Obamacare that are going to eventually probably result in a huge amount of cost savings and lower premiums over time, or at least a slowed growth. But now, I mean, Obamacare was really designed to solve one of the two problems, the problem of access to care, not the cost problem. But now, in the same way that Romney Care was kind of used as the basis for Obamacare, Massachusetts is now passing, as you know, cost savings laws. And some of those might be used in a few years to then pass federal legislation, which will control costs.
Absolutely.
All right.
Let me follow up on what's going on with the so-called IRS scandal. Now, the president said yesterday that the Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew, had demanded the resignation of the acting commissioner of the IRS, Stephen Miller, because of the criticism of the allegations that right-wing groups were being unfairly targeted and scrutinized when requesting a 501c4 tax-exempt status. Now, a couple of bits of data have surfaced, which only further reinforce my view that this is really not a scandal. This is, something we want to pay attention to, but not a scandal, and certainly nothing having to do with the Obama administration. One is that there are plenty of liberal groups that also received what is being considered extra IRS scrutiny. One of these is Progress Texas in Texas. And I say, if both sides are receiving so-called extra scrutiny, isn't it just scrutiny? What's extra about it if this is just the procedure, right, Lewis?
Fair.
The other thing is that we have now heard a lot of analysis and discussion about the IRS. And the more I read about it, the more I realize that over time, over the last 50, 60 years, there have been political moves, political decisions, political actions taken by the IRS, completely disconnected from direction from the White House, that have been difficult, that have put obstacles in the road for liberal and conservative groups. I mean, remember when the NAACP was being targeted and receiving extra scrutiny, with which what at the time it really was extra, but from the IRS. We have a lot of these examples, and again, we really have a situation here where we have to scrutinize these groups. These nonprofit statuses are vastly misused, both by churches, by political groups, etc. And we have groups, Tea Party groups, patriot groups, small government groups, which make part of their reason for existing is that they oppose government, they oppose taxation. And the more I learn about this, I just am having a hard time seeing where the scandal is.
Is this just like another Benghazi thing? Is this just slam the current administration, make liberals look bad type of thing?
I really don't know. I mean, we know that the right is very desperate to create a scandal, right, Natan? They need a scandal right now to discredit a president who, for all of the things where we can say he didn't do the right thing, he's indistinguishable from the right, has accomplished quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this week they're trying to roll them all together. You got the AP scandal, the IRS scandal, and Benghazi all together. The reality is that people forget that almost all government jobs are civil service jobs that are merit-based. People just apply to them and get selected. Obama has nothing to do with it. Almost no one in his administration has anything to do with it. If they did, this would be a scandal. If Obama or someone in his administration had told someone at the IRS, get your employees to crack down on Tea Party groups. But it doesn't seem like that's what happened. It was just people either interpreting a law incorrectly or doing things on their own for political reasons. In either case, it has nothing to do with Obama.
In reality, these are just the groups that you would target if you're trying to find fraud.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if before this is over, the Republican Party forgets about this entire thing because it brings more attention to abuses of 501c4 status. And a lot of those groups, none of which have actually lost nonprofit status yet, start to lose it because they are actually violating the rules.
Right.
I would not be at all surprised.
Right. And some of these groups, I'm sure, are starting to, talk about this themselves and start doing lobbying, advertising, whatever they do.
Absolutely. Let me encourage you to become a David Pakman Show member. Not only do you get access to the bonus show, which is hosted by producer Lewis, the 1-hour TV show is available to members commercial-free. Instead of in individual clips like we have on YouTube, one video, no commercials, the entire show. And we also have a commercial-free podcast feed and an archive of all of our programming and all of the bonus shows that goes all the way back to 2005. All of that is available to members. And we're talking about pennies a day. DavidPakman.com/membership to sign up. We could really use your support. We'll take a break. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Lewis, do you know why patriots eat turkey on Thanksgiving?
Why is that?
Because turkeys are evil, socialist, liberal birds that need to be eliminated.
I see.
Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Corey Torres. Corey, thanks for being a David Pakman Show member. We absolutely appreciate it. This is a really, it's a little bit of a convoluted story, but I'm going to do the best I can to explain it to you. The Heritage Foundation, the conservative group, put out a report on the cost of the immigration bill that's currently being discussed. Now, one of the authors of that report is Jason Richwine. And the report was controversial in that it contained a lot of negative assertions about immigrants, specifically Hispanic immigrants, and it kind of caused a bit of a stir. And it then emerged that Jason Richwine wrote a graduate dissertation which was premised on the idea that Latinos are inherently less intelligent than white people. And it was also revealed that Richwine, again, one of the co-authors of this Heritage Foundation report on immigration, that Richwine had ties to anti-immigration groups. I'm not remotely surprised by any of this, but it's compelling that the information has come out. Think Progress put together a really good article about it, and Heritage announced that Richwine has resigned. Their statement, Jason Richwine let us know he's decided to resign from his position. He's no longer employed by Heritage. Now, as more information came out about the dissertation, it's just amazing, the ideas that this guy had and the fact that he became part of what's considered on the right, kind of a mainstream right-wing group, the Heritage Foundation. I mean, they're not considered crazy within the right.
Right.
The dissertation argued, according to Think Progress, that immigration policy should discriminate against low IQ immigrants in immigration policy, but that such discrimination should be masked in the language of high skill and low skill immigration. So the idea would be the U.S. immigration policy that eventually is made the law should encourage high-skill immigration to the U.S. What they're talking about is Europeans. Mm-hmm. And it should discourage low-skill immigration to the U.S., what in this context is mostly Latino immigration, but also African immigration and kind of lower-class Asian immigration, right?
Right.
Very, very xenophobic, because essentially what we're talking about is just reinforcing the groups, the ethnic groups, the country of origin groups that already make up a large portion of the U.S., right?
Mm-hmm.
So eventually we saw through what this was. And the other thing that we also have to talk about is that we do have research about how xenophobic views, political views, and intelligence are all correlated. And it doesn't really support Jason Richwine's ideas, right? Research finds that children with low intelligence are more likely to hold prejudiced attitudes as adults. For example, not wanting dumb Hispanics to come into the country.
Fascinating.
That's really the connection. I'm not at all surprised, right? We often hear about kind of this projecting one's reality onto someone else, or just this kind of opposite thing where you create a narrative that actually is the exact opposite of the reality. And again, that seems to be the case here.
Yeah, and if you step back, I mean, how would you even measure the, quote, skill level of an immigrant coming in?
Right.
I mean, you're looking at a name on a piece of paper that's part of a queue.
Yeah.
It's
and the idea
ridiculous.
of checking into the other thing, Natan, is that skill is something which is learned, right? Skill, we actually have. I understand what he's doing by trying to actually kind of be racist and xenophobic, but skill is something that you learn, and your aptitude for learning skills is based on other attributes. So it's not really even a very good, thinly veiled, racist, whatever.
Well, it's interesting. People were talking about maybe applying the rules that are similar to what Canada does, which is like a points-based system where if you have a bachelor's degree, you get a certain amount of points. If you have a graduate degree, you get more points. If you have certain job experience, you get even more points. If you speak French, you get more points. And if you have a certain amount of points, you can get in. And what's interesting is that, graduate degrees, for example, are correlated with higher IQs. So the question is, are you getting the higher IQs because the people who do them have higher IQs, or is it learned to a certain extent? I know IQs to a certain extent are not believed to be learned.
Right.
But we have no problem. I don't have any problem with saying that you get more points and it's more likely that we're going to let you into the country if you have a graduate degree, but it's not okay to use IQ.
No, certainly not.
But why is a question.
Pat Robertson. That's kind of a broader conversation.
You don't like it, but the reality is that it's not that much different. I mean, imagine that 99% of people with a PhD have an IQ of 115 or above.
Right.
Okay. So what's to stop, what's wrong with saying you have to have an IQ of 115 to get in? I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, how would you argue?
You would argue, you would argue it in this way. You would say that, I would argue it the same way that you argue skills. Just because you have correlation between, let's back up. Only in certain countries does high IQ lead to people having graduate degrees. You can have people of all sorts of IQs from all parts of the world, and because of factors external to IQ, they may or may not have any particular degree, right?
I would argue it slightly different. I would probably say that it's not okay to use IQ because that's simple discrimination, whereas the other case, you are prizing more education, which will be useful to your economy. That's not to say that someone with a 95 IQ can't get that experience and be a good potential citizen. It's just that you're going to prize someone who already has the experience.
IQ is not certainly not the best measure, but I think it's the easiest.
And certainly in this context, it's discriminatory.
Yes.
Yeah. Pat Robertson says, Pat Robertson got one of these emails, which he gets, and we never know if they're real or not because who really goes to Pat Robertson for advice? In any case, Pat Robertson got an email saying, from a wife saying, my husband cheated on me, and I'm kind of having trouble. I'm struggling to forgive my husband to get past the fact that he cheated. Pat Robertson had some advice for that woman. Let's listen to the brilliant advice of Pat Robertson.
All right, here's the secret.
Okay.
And this is the secret. Stop talking about the cheating. He cheated on you. Well, he's a man. Okay.
Right. Hey, men cheat.
Is begin to focus on why you married him in the first place, on what he does good.
Let's stop right there. Maybe she married him in the first place, presumably because he wasn't cheating, and now he is. So I don't know that it's necessarily that useful to focus on why they got married in the first place if that has changed. Like, for example, he used to not cheat on me, so I married him, but now he does.
Oh, maybe.
All right, let's continue.
Does he provide a home for you to live in? Does he provide food for you to eat? Does he provide clothes for you to wear?
All right, we have to stop it again.
This is multi-level.
We could do an hour on this.
Yeah.
as stupid as the advice is at face value, built into this is the assumption that the man is providing everything. He's providing the woman with food. Without her husband who cheats on her, she wouldn't even be able to eat.
She would wither and die.
She would wither away and die because the man is the one who provides the food. Let's continue.
Is he nice to the children? Do you have a happy family? Does he take the kids to sporting events? Does he go out and watch their Little League games?
All right. So if he goes to Little League, even if he's cheating, you might want to keep him around.
Also assuming that they have kids.
Also assuming they have kids. And then let me get to the last part here where he actually starts to say, sometimes women are responsible for their husbands cheating.
But recognize also, like it or not, males have a tendency to wander a little bit. And what you want to do is to make a home so wonderful that he doesn't want to wander. But think of the temptations that are out there. The internet is filled with pornography. The
He knows
magazines are filled with pictures, salacious pictures of women. You look anywhere you turn around, there's some solicitation to the senses to entice a man. And so what you have to do is say, my husband was captured.
Yeah, exactly. It's not his fault. It was you weren't doing all the right stuff enough to prevent him from cheating, because he is like, he has no control over all of these things like porn on the internet, which Pat Robertson seems to know a lot about, by the way.
There was one of these we did a while back with Pat Robertson where the woman said that, I don't know, I guess in the bedroom things got stale, and he accused her of letting herself go.
Right.
And,
Yeah. South Carolina Republican State Senator Tom Corbin put together a bill this year which would create what's he's calling it an unorganized militia in South Carolina for everybody who's over 17 years old, as long as you're not already part of the National Guard. Now, South Carolina already has a law which created the so-called unorganized militia. This bill would define who would become a member, and this has already passed the Senate panel. And the bill reads, any able-bodied citizen of the state who is over 17 and can legally buy a firearm is deemed a member of the South Carolina unorganized militia unless they are already a member of the National Guard or the organized militia not in Guard service. Now, the point of this, Lewis, is that congressional efforts at gun control, maybe, presumably, the idea is wouldn't affect firearms ownership in South Carolina because, hey, it's part of a militia, right? Which, of course, goes back to the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. The only problem is that the guy seems to be completely off of his rocker. He told a local news outlet that the militia would be able to fight invaders like the Red Chinese. Yeah, why would the Red Chinese be going to South Carolina? I have absolutely no idea, but that's the explanation that State Senator Tom Corbin made. The other thing is, an unorganized militia, by definition, is not really a militia, isn't it? It's kind of like an oxymoron.
No, it'd be more like a mob, right?
No, you're wrong on this point. An unorganized militia is what's called a reserve militia, meaning that you can define it very broadly, like any able-bodied man, between 17 and 45, and they don't even have to meet regularly. Whereas the National Guard would be a select militia, which is why it wouldn't be an unorganized one. But you don't have to meet at all to be an unorganized militia.
In your estimation, Natan, are unorganized militias good pretext under which to veil avoiding federal government gun safety laws?
No, and furthermore, the Second Amendment, given the way the court has interpreted it, saying that it doesn't depend on the militia clause, it doesn't matter. The government can regulate whatever they can regulate, whether it's in a militia or not.
Is South Carolina still fighting the Battle of Fort Sumter in their hearts? That's really the question I come away with. Let's take a break. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We'll be back after this. Dennis Campbell will be with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Dennis Campbell's with us today. He is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. He also hosts Worldview Show on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Worldview Show. So, Dennis, there is more noise about the United Kingdom possibly leaving Europe, essentially. Tell us kind of what's going on, what's the catalyst here, and a little bit about the possible implications.
Well, most of the noise about the UK leaving Europe is coming from the government, which is the Tories side of the government, because the other piece of the government, the Lib Dems, are very much in favor of being in Europe. Um, Nigel Farage, he is the leader of a party called the UK Independence Party, or UKIP. They would be the closest thing to your Tea Party. And they won 26% of the seats in local elections. And all of this has kind of whipped the Tories up into a lather because they are absolutely dead set against anything to do with Europe. If they could, they'd build a fence around this island and make sure that nobody came in or out, and only white people would be around, and the rest of anybody that wanted to come across would be pretty much out of the picture. The funny thing is that the 18 to 34-year-old group very much like being a part of Europe. Travel is easy. There's only one currency once you get across the channel to worry about, and they like a more cosmopolitan lifestyle. So most of the action is coming from these older Tories wanting to leave the European Union because they're afraid that with the easing of some travel rules that Romanians and Bulgarians will flood into the UK, just as the Poles did. But of course, they're now leaving. That will have more gypsies and their caravan communities squatting on farmland. And it's a real NIMBY, not in my backyard series of immigration issues with our open borders.
So is there like a xenophobic undertone to what's going on with this group?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's the UKIP. If the UKIP are the Tea Party, there's another even farther right group called the British National Party, or the BNP. They're headed by a guy by the name of Nick Griffin, and he makes the KKK look positively liberal. They're even further to the right. We have about 6 parties in this country. You have the Labour Party, which is very large. They're out of government at this point. You have the Tories. The Labour would be the closest thing, by the way, to the U.S. Democratic Party. You have the Tories, which are the closest thing to your Republican Party. And they formed what's called a coalition government because they weren't able to win enough seats to control Parliament on their own. So they went into government with the strangest of bedfellows, the Liberal Democrats. And just as their name says, they're very liberal. And so to see the Conservatives and the Liberals together in the same party governing has been quite funny. And then, of course, we have UKIP and BNP and a very small Green Party. So it's really an interesting situation.
I was reading an analysis for Friends of the Earth, which was published by EU policy expert Dr. Charlotte Burns, and it actually talked very interestingly about how leaving Europe, so to speak, for the UK could actually be really, really bad when it comes to environmentalism, because prior to the EU, there were, in other words, being part of Europe has actually put more pressure on the UK to be more environmentally conscious, and that leaving Europe could actually be a disaster. Do you know anything about that? What would your reaction to that be?
Absolutely. I mean, we're an island, of course, and in some respects, we're more closely aligned with the North America than we are with Western Europe. There's a whole list of things that would be affected, and the reasons that we talk about mostly, that we hear mostly from the Tories, are that it's too expensive. We pay an unfair share. We're on the hook for banks in Cyprus, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the rules are way too strict on the environment. This is the UK government and businesses talking. So it almost becomes a sovereignty issue. Are we able to, control our own destiny, which is what they say? We're not a part of the single currency of the euro. As I said, we're an island in so many respects because we're more closely aligned to North America. You had Prime Minister Cameron there this week, and you also had Prince Harry there on an official visit. So, they'll look for any excuse, including it's Thursday. I mean, the list just goes on and on of reasons why they want to leave. But when push comes to shove, there are a number of people in the Tory party that say, wait a minute, that's not a good idea.
So bottom line, how likely is this to happen?
It's still very much up in the air. I mean, we've got an election coming in 2015, very early in 2015. And I think part of what you're going to see as a result of that election is a lot of focus on a promise that David Cameron has made with the Tories. And he has basically said, we're going to have a referendum if the Tories are put back into office for another 5-year term. That is creating a bit of an issue with everybody.
Interesting. What's coming up on Worldview Show?
Well, we've got a story that we've been working on, quite literally, I've been working on for about 7 years, taking a look at Pima County in Arizona. Now, that's a part of Arizona around Tucson that we don't hear much about. We normally hear about Jan Brewer and Sheriff Joe Arpaio in and around Phoenix. But they've been fighting election machine fraud for quite some time now. And what we're really trying to do is expose in a very simple way and show what's going on there. We also have Tony McNeil, who is involved in interim hiring, and we're going to talk a little bit about the labor market across Europe and how it's being affected. And then tomorrow we'll have a segment on from a woman who's recovered from breast cancer and gone back into the workplace, and we'll be talking a little bit about the situation with Angelina Jolie having undergone a double mastectomy and her role as a spokesperson for this dreaded disease.
Very, very easy to get Worldview with Dennis Campbell. Go to youtube.com/Worldview Show. Hit the subscribe button. Then you'll know about all of the new interviews and videos. Excellent stuff, Dennis. We'll talk to you next week.
Looking forward to it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show, including everybody watching us from the We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama Facebook page. Make sure to check that out. The other day, Lewis, I went outside for, like several hours for the first time since it started getting warm again. And of course, I forgot to put sunscreen on and got instantly burned. And it was a pretty bad situation. So I figured, I should get some sunscreen for the summer.
Right.
So I went online and I thought, spray-on sunscreen would be really convenient because you don't have to get your hands all greasy, and it just seems really simple. You just spray it on and you're good. So I ordered some spray-on sunscreen, this stuff right here. This is not an advertisement, by the way. It's actually the opposite. You'll see. Banana Boat Spray-On 30 SPF, right?
You had to order that?
This is good. I have the Amazon Prime thing where you get free 2-day shipping on anything. So anyway, I ordered this thing. And then I mentioned it to Natan because he saw my sunburn. And he's like, oh, no. You don't want spray-on sunscreen because it probably has a bunch of really bad chemicals that you don't want getting in your body. So I've brought it in so we can analyze this. So Natan, I'm going to tell you what the active ingredients are.
Right.
You tell me what you think about this.
Yeah.
So we've got avobenzone.
Right.
We have octocrylene. And then we have oxybenzone. Those are sunscreens. Is this the bad kind, or can I use this?
That's the bad kind. Yeah, you don't want any benzones. They're known to cause mutations in the DNA of skin. Right. And they're actually absorbed into the skin, and potentially some of it is even absorbed into the bloodstream. So, and even if it isn't, you don't want your skin mutating because that'll precipitate skin cancer.
So why can't they just make a spray-on sunscreen that doesn't have that stuff? What's the right type of sunscreen? What are the active ingredients?
The ones, I have very sensitive skin, so I've actually researched this, so I can say with some certitude that zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, like Aveeno baby formula and
so I need baby products.
Yeah, basically. Basically, those are okay, but the reason why those can't be used in sprays is because they would be pretty toxic to inhale.
Huh.
So I'm pretty sure sprays are a no-go. In general, only because you need to use some of these bad chemicals to use it.
I do worry. Now, is that going to make my skin greasy? Because Lewis, when you put this stuff on and then you're just all greased up, it gets all over your clothes. It's a disaster.
Don't they all do that?
Well, not the one that Dave has there. If you use the chemical goop stuff, that's pretty well absorbed and not that greasy, but that's the price you pay.
Yeah, it's getting absorbed into your body.
Right. So basically, that typical image of a lifeguard with that white sunscreen on his nose, for example? Well, that's zinc oxide. But the thing is, now they have nano-sized zinc, which is absorbed into the skin. And some people have raised concerns that that's actually penetrating the skin.
Great.
But in a study, it was found that it doesn't do that. So it's a little greasy, but it's not really that white. It'll slightly whiten your skin.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to get some of that stuff. I don't want this stuff in my body, Lewis.
Nobody does.
Here's an interesting idea. We sometimes post on our Facebook page hate mail that we get, and we have a fan of the show who does professional voiceover. He's like one of these deep voice announcer guys, and he just decided to do like a dramatic interpretive reading of some of the hate mail, and he sent it to me, and it's really, really funny, and I think we might have to make this a regular segment. Take a listen to this.
Hi, I watched some of your videos on YouTube and wanted to say that you are gay and autistic. Please consider the free will of Americans next time you feel the need to spray your communist menstrual blood on the internet. It is because of retarded like you, the American workforce no longer works effectively.
Very good. That's brilliant. I mean, when you take trolling emails and actually hear what they would sound like if a person said this stuff, it escalates the absurdity of it 1,000-fold.
The music was a really nice touch, too.
Yeah, we need a name for this segment, okay? So I don't know if it's Patriot Hate Mail or what it's supposed to be. I don't know what the name for the segment is. Maybe it's Deep Voice Announcer Guy Reads Hate Mail. I mean, I don't know.
We could do something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
But I think we could be onto something pretty big here.
This is gold. Yeah.
Let's get to actual voicemails from people. 219-2DavidP is our voicemail line. Here is a voicemail from someone who is not at all happy with how the interview with birther queen Orly Tates went earlier in the week.
Yes, I was watching the interview that you conducted with Mrs. Orly Tates.
Right.
And I just wanted you to know that I hit the stop button the minute you smiled and lifted up your coffee cup. That was so rude on your part. I'm thinking I've never seen a host drink while somebody's talking.
Okay.
You know, that was just totally rude of you. And
by
I'm
the
thinking,
way,
how unprofessional was that? I couldn't even watch the interview. And I knew at that point, with your sly little smile, that you were trying to set her up and try to bring her down. But you know what? It's your guy, Obama, who's going down. Not Orly Tates, but you and all of the supporters of this thug that we have in the White House, this N thug. You know what I mean by the N word. Okay?
Yeah, I do. It means that your opposition to President Obama is incredibly racist, like many of your colleagues.
Thug in the White House, you guys are the ones who are going down. You're going to lose your show. Nobody's going to watch you. You all are insignificant now, and you all are the ones that are going down.
Yeah.
People like Orly Tates, they're going up.
Yeah, Orly Tates is going to take our show down because of an N thug in the White House. That's actually a real voicemail. That's almost indistinguishable from a parody, but it is real.
Yeah, I love it how this coward doesn't even have the cojones to say the actual N-word in a nasty way.
But Louis, that would be racist.
Right.
Here's another voicemail, a positive voicemail, one of the few.
Hey guys, this is Danny from Tampa. Just finished listening to Monday's show. I'm always a show behind because I just get the podcast and listen to it at work. Listen, great show, awesome show. I have to admit sometimes I don't like it when David interviews these nut jobs. But this interview with that Orly lady, whoa, my God, the patience that you have to break down their arguments, I swear to God, I wish I had that patience. I love listening to you guys.
So opposing views, Louis, on the Orly Tates interview. Very divergent views there.
One is just racial slurs and insults.
One refers to the president as the N-word thug, and the other says that it was a pretty well-reasoned and patient interview.
I just want to point out one thing. I really hate it when we get someone with a Southern accent who's making a racist remark, because it just creates another confirmation for the people that want to think that all Southerners think that way. And it's just really, and it does a disservice to her fellow Southerners.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it just so happens like we get about, I don't know, around 5 or 6 voicemails a day roughly. And the racist ones just happen to be on this show, mostly from people with Southern accents. And we have no control over it.
Right. And of course, we can't talk broadly about people with Southern accents.
No.
But we can say that we are well aware of what's happening in many of the red states down south.
That angry voicemail is more evidence that we need to be funding and supporting alternative independent media, because we have a lot of people who are very uninformed out there. Please become a David Pakman Show member. We give you a whole suite of great perks and benefits. But most importantly, you're putting money into alternative, non-corporate, progressive media. Go to davidpakman.com. Subscribe. It takes mere seconds, Louis, to become a David Pakman Show member. It does a big, big thing to help us. We'll see you on Monday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.